Welcome to the first project for 2013. Now, if you watched last week's video, you'd know that this project is going to be a fairly big one, and that's going to be a hand tool workbench. Now, the design itself is based on the Roubo workbenches, and in particular, it's a split top Roubo. So the workbench itself is going to be budget friendly. That's my big goal, and using easily attainable species of wood. So in my case, I'm using radiata pine. It's cheap, it's every single hardware store you go to, and it's relatively stable. And the hardware I'll be using is just going to be fairly budget. So the dog hole vise is only coming in at about $22, and the leg vise is coming in at about $50. So all up, it's about $75 in hardware and whatever the timber costs. So very budget friendly compared to some of the workbenches out there. Now, what you can see beneath me here are the two tops. Now, this one on the back here, this is going to be the back slab, and that is finished. It's been glued together, it's been flattened, and it is final dimension is 315 millimeters wide by 88 millimeters thick, and the length is about 2.3 meters. Now, the one I'm sitting on, however, is going to be the front slab, and this has still got some work to go. Now, obviously there was quite a lot of work involved in the project before we got to this stage, and really the biggest part of the work would have had to be the milling process. So let's have a really quick look at how I went about doing that. Now, skip planing is a really good method to use if you're wanting to retain as much thickness in the workpieces as possible, and that's certainly true for a workbench. Now, there is some downsides to skip planing. Because skip planing relies mostly on a thicknesser, it won't be able to remove any twisting or bowing. Now, it can help reduce the amount of bowing, but if you have twist, you can pretty much kiss this method goodbye. Now, this method is a thicknesser only sort of method, although for me, I do still use my jointer in one step. So the idea behind it is that you set the cutting depth to be the minimal amount of material you need to remove to make sure that one face of your workpiece is nice and flat and smooth. Now, once you have one face of your workpiece smooth, you flip it 180 degrees, you raise the bed or lower the cut head, depending on your style of thicknesser, and take another pass. And this ensures that both of your faces are nice and parallel to one another. Once you have two parallel faces, I'll actually take it over to my jointer and joint one edge so it's at least close to 90 degrees, and then I'll run it through the thicknesser again on edge to bring all of the workpieces to a uniform thickness. And in my case, that was about 88 millimeters. Now, the glue up for this is pretty simple. There's nothing special about it. I've done it in two halves, so of course the rear slab and the front slab. And the only real thing to consider is with the front slab, you don't want to glue on the front piece or the second piece because there's still work to happen to those. So in this case, this piece here and this piece here haven't been glued on. And that's just because we got to cut dog holes and add an end cap. Now, the other thing I will mention is that I did end up using biscuits along every lamination here just to limit the amount of slippage. So I did about 4 or 5 biscuits along the length of each lamination here, and all that was for is to limit the up and down movement while I was applying those clamps. So that's all it is to it really, just apply lots of glue onto each surface, avoiding the outside faces, and then clamp the hell out of it. While we wait for that piece to dry, I'm going to turn my attention onto this slab that I glued up yesterday. Now, I've already gone ahead and I've just removed most of the excess glue with my cabinet scraper here, and this is nothing more than a card scraper put into a device which holds it. So, you know, a card scraper would do the exact same job, and if you really wanted to, you could even use something like a jack plane. But cabinet scraper to me is the best job because it's easy to sharpen and it's not the end of the world if, you know, you gunk the blade up. We will be flattening this workbench at the end of the build once it's all assembled. We'll be doing it with a router. However, before we get to that stage, we want to help ourselves as much as possible so we don't have, you know, about 1 centimeter of stock to remove, because as it is, this workbench isn't as thick as, you know, I would ideally like. It's just what material I had and what was cheap. So to flatten this workbench, it's a fairly simple affair. Now, I haven't got a 12-inch jointer, so I can't flatten this on my jointer, but I have got a 15-inch planer, so I can, or thicknesser I should say, so I can send it through my thicknesser. However, if I send it through my thicknesser as it is now, it's not going to be removing any twist if there is any, or nor will it be removing the bow. So there's a few things that we have to do first, and one is determine if there's any twist. And that's where these sticks come in. So this is a winding stick, so you know, they're just equally sized pieces of wood. They're relatively flat and square. And I put one at one end, and notice I have some tape here, and I put the other at the other. Okay, so I just want to quickly show you how these winding sticks work. So as you can see, right at the back of the board there, you have the first winding stick with the green strip. And now as I put down this second winding strip in front of, what you can start to see is a contrast. So you have this one in the foreground, obviously in focus. But if you look into the background, you can see a nice even strip of green coming across. Now, if the board had twist, what would happen is one end would become higher, and you would start to see more green coming through on one side, and that would indicate that one corner, like up here, is higher than the other, and that's what indicates twist. So if that was the case, you would come back and you would knock down this corner with your hand plane until when you put your winding stick back down, it's nice and even. So I sighted down the entire piece with my winding sticks, and I have determined that this edge is a little bit high. And I did expect that because I could actually feel a ridge along the entire length with this second board here. So that's nothing, no surprise to me now. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to mark it with a little bit of chalk on that edge, so I can see if I'm making progress, and come through with my number 7 jointing plane at a nice skewed angle and remove those high spots. Once I've done a pass along there, I'll redo the winding stick test again, see if there's any twist. And once it's all looking nice and flat, I'll then be happy to actually sand this through the thicknesser to remove a thin layer of material. Now, with this plane, I'm putting more pressure down here on the back here because this area here is lower than this edge, and I know that. So that's just a theory behind it. Okay, so now I'll just test it again with my winding sticks. And spot on. So that is good enough to now take through the thicknesser for a light pass. The method I just showed you works really well, especially on larger pieces, because obviously not many people have got, 12-inch jointers. Not many people have 8-inch jointers like me. So you have to be able to do it with your hand tools, and it's a good method to know. Now, this second slab here, this is only about 9 inches wide. I've got an 8-inch jointer, so I'm actually going to use my jointer for this second piece. Now, I've removed the blade guard, and I've also removed this piece here, which is, it's another blade guard, but you have to remove it when you're doing a rebate sort of cut. So I've removed this guard here, and now everything is completely exposed, and this brings in a few more safety concerns than usual. So blade is completely exposed, and I mean, it's not too bad here because your workpiece is covering it all. So once, there's no point in having the blade guard installed. But the dangerous thing is having this side bit of the blade exposed. Now, there has been one occasion where I was wearing a button-up shirt and I had little flappy bits at the bottom, and I actually was doing a fairly simple cut. It was just, same sort of thing as I'm about to do, but my shirt got sucked into the cutter head here, and it started wrapping around the cutter head, and I got pulled into the machine. Now, luckily, the shirt actually tore apart and that piece of fabric was completely removed, so I didn't get, anything cut off, but it was very close, and it was one of those experiences which is like, wow, that was just too close. So if you're doing this, make sure you've got really nice fitting clothing. You don't want any flappy bits, and right now I'm wearing an apron, which is perfect. So yeah, just keep that in mind, that there is more safety concerns with this particular cut than you would usually have. Okay, I'm not sure how well this will show up, but this is the bottom of the slab, and this is what will be getting planed, or I should say jointed on my joiner. Now, I've marked all these purple X's on the bottom here because I'm not wanting to remove all of the material here till it's nice and flat. All I'm wanting is 2 points which I can reference on the thicknesses bed. So if I have this piece here and this piece here nice and clean of chalk lines, I know that my thicknesser will then be able to plane the opposing face or the opposite face to be nice and flat and nice and parallel to the bottom here. Now, I'm not worried about low spots because, well, it's under the bench, no one's ever going to see it. All I'm concerned about is retaining as much thickness as I can. So by adding these chalk lines here, it just gives me a visual indication of how much material I'm removing and whether or not I will have a nice flat and straight reference surface for my thicknesses. Now keep in mind this is about 9 inches wide and my jointer is only 8 inches wide, so there will be a nice ridge of material remaining after we've done these cuts, and all that needs is a clean up with a hand plane. Okay, so there's no rocking, I feel nice and stable, I've got support pieces and I've got roller support, so let's make this cut. Okay, so this is nice here. That needs more in this section here, and definitely needs some down the bottom. There's no chalk removed, so let's take 1 or 2 more passes. Okay, so this is looking nice in the center here. Got nice clean surface here and here, so that's good for the thicknesser. No chalk all of here and no chalk up here. Okay, so now that we have both of our slabs nice and flat and plain, so there's no twist, I can actually cut the rear slab or the bigger slab down to its final length. So I've already trimmed one end, and now I'm just going to cut it down to be 2.3 meters long, and I'm just going to be using my 12-inch miter saw. Now, of course, if you don't have a big miter saw like my one, a circular saw would work just fine. You would just have to take a cut from one end, flip it over and take a cut on the other end. You might have a little bit of issue getting the two lines to meet up, but it wouldn't be too difficult. So here I'm just marking 2300 mil. And all of this here is going to be the waste. So as you can see here, I actually tried to do this on my radial arm saw first, but I realized this would be able to do it in one pass, whereas the radial arm would need 2. Okay, and now with my laser lined up, I'm just going to clamp this down onto the fence just to ensure that it doesn't move. Alright, so that's going to be it for this video. Now notice that on this front slab I didn't trim it down to length yet, and that's because there's still some work to do. We've got a end cap to go, we've got a vise, and we've got quite a bit to do on this slab, so I'm not trimming it down to length until all of that stuff is sorted out. So I realized that this video was quite a long, drawn out, talking sort of video, and I did warn you, but really there's not a whole lot of woodworking involved in these slab glue ups. It's pretty much just, you know, flattening timber and then gluing it together. So there wasn't a whole lot to actually show you in the way of woodworking, but the processes that were involved were definitely worth knowing. So I thought I would cover it in, you know, adequate detail, so it might make a little bit more sense if you're deciding to do something like this yourself. So if you've made it this far, thank you. I realize it would have been a little bit long and drawn out, but I promise next time it will be more actually woodworking and more entertaining and hopefully more engaging as well. So next week what we'll be covering is the end cap install. So we'll be cutting a tenon for that and all that sort of stuff. We'll be covering a vise install. So I'll be modifying this press vise into a tail vise with a dog hole strip, and as well as making the dog hole strip and all of that cool stuff. And then once that's out of the way, we'll be moving on to making the base for the workbench and yeah, it should be quite a good bit of video content for the next couple of videos. So if you don't want to miss out on them, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So youtube.com/GeorgeWoodshop, or just click the link here and subscribe there. Or if you're not on YouTube, you've also got the website. So you head over to georgewoodshop.com, and on the right hand side of every page, you'll see an email subscriptions box. And if you enter your email address there, click subscribe, you'll be notified via email for every new video. And you know, doesn't get much easier than that. Now, if you're on Facebook, we're over on Facebook as well. So head over to facebook.com/GeorgeWoodshop and like that page. You know, got 200 odd subscribers there, but we've got over 1,300 here. So it'd be good to get those numbers up a little bit closer to the YouTube numbers. So once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week with a more entertaining video.